This is Mission Control Houston. Welcome back to our continued coverage of the Cygnus cargo spacecraft's journey to the International Space Station. If this is the first time that you're joining us this morning, we're talking about a cargo spacecraft that's delivering supplies and scientific experiments to the people who live aboard the International Space Station. It kicked off its journey on Tuesday with a launch from Cape Canaveral, Florida. Earlier this morning, it arrived at the space station and was robotically captured by NASA astronaut Laurel O'Hara at 3:59 a.m. Central, 4:59 a.m. Eastern. Getting a recap of earlier events on your screen now. She was stationed in the space station's cupola at the controls of the robotic arm. That's the view that Laurel had there. And this is the Cygnus cargo spacecraft being captured by that robotic arm. O'Hara has since gone on to other tasks in her day because our operation is now at the hands of flight controllers here in Mission Control. The robotics experts have brought Cygnus in closer to its installation port. We're in a brief handover period in Mission Control right now between our communication satellites, but we do hope to get video of Cygnus. On the robotic arm back shortly. And there we have it. This is the Cygnus cargo spacecraft at the end of the Canadarm2 robotic arm on the International Space Station. It's not quite yet at its installation port. When robotics officers are ready, they're going to put Cygnus closer to the International Space Station, ready for its installation. So we'll watch that movement as it happens. They're working meticulously to align the spacecraft flush with the space station's exterior when that happens, so that bolts can be driven into place, marking the installation complete. So let's talk about some of the people that are involved in today's operation. Here in Mission Control, we are under the direction of Flight Director Diane Daly. Earlier this morning, she also saw the capture of the Cygnus cargo spacecraft, working with all of her flight controllers. There she is, standing on the right side of your screen right now. So earlier today, she oversaw the capture, polling, mission control, and the Cygnus Control Center in Dulles, Virginia, on all of their various go, no-go milestones until capture. Now she's overseeing the day-to-day of the International Space Station, as well as our robotics officer here in Mission Control, who is manipulating the space station's robotic arm. So he's getting ready to move the Cygnus cargo spacecraft to its installation port. Here in Mission Control, we have OSO, the Operations Support Officer, who directly oversees operations of the Common Berthing Mechanism. Earlier today, if you followed along with our earlier coverage, Capcom was a key player, communicating with the crew up in space quite often. The crew is now going throughout their day-to-day activities. This is a completely ground-based installation of the Cygnus cargo spacecraft. So one of the steps here this morning is to inhibit the space station's thrusters from firing. The orbiting lab has a type of gyroscope to keep it in the correct orientation. When robotics officers press Cygnus into its installation port, we do not want the space station's automatic systems to think that something is throwing the orientation off. So those are temporarily inhibited.
And can see into the Merlin, please. Goodbye.
The first thing that we'll look for is a green light on the ready-to-latch sensors. There are 4 sensors that indicate that the 2 berthing mechanisms, one on the Cygnus side and one on the space station side, are in proper alignment. Then Cygnus will undergo first stage capture, or when the command is sent for the capture latches to make contact with the fittings on the Cygnus side of the common berthing mechanism. But it isn't secured just yet when that happens. At second stage, the flight controller asks the capture latches to pull Cygnus into the fully captured position. And finally, bolts are driven. There are 16 bolts in total. All 16 bolts will turn at the same time until they are secure. At that point, the space station's attitude control thrusters can resume their operations, and the robotic arm can let go, and Cygnus installation will be complete.
Station Houston on Space to Ground 2 for any available USOS crew member. For exercise, wanted to give you a heads up. We're going to enter the no exercise constraint between 11:40 and 12:40 is when that constraint applies. 11:40 to 12:40. That's a good read.
Huntsville Station, you okay with that view, Chrissy?
That view looks great. Thank you so much.
Station Houston on 2 for Jaws. Yeah, so
With you on 2?
got you on 2. So for your first 2 activities here coming up in about 5 minutes, though you have a go to perform those on the timeline. We will give you a go when we're ready for that third activity that starts about 12:20 on your timeline. That's a CBCS one.
Okay, copy. The first 2 that start at 11:45 and 11:50, I'll execute on time and wait for your go for the third.
Good read.
If you're starting your morning with us this morning, the Cygnus cargo spacecraft is on your screen. It's about slightly off-center to the left with the gold cylindrical solar arrays. That is a cargo spacecraft carrying 8,200 pounds of scientific experiments and supplies for the crew living aboard the International Space Station. It arrived at the space station earlier this morning, was robotically captured by NASA astronaut Laurel O'Hara, and now is waiting for its installation into the International Space Station. This is an activity performed by ground controllers here in Mission Control Houston.
Station on 2 for Luna.
Andy, please go ahead on 2.
Just want to let you know parameter settings is complete in 11.15.
And we copy 11:15.
We're in a brief but expected handover period here in Mission Control, but the folks that you see in the room here are really the stars of the show for the installation coverage. This is a completely ground-based operation. And we're back with our live views of the Cygnus cargo spacecraft. Robotics officers here on the ground are working meticulously to perfectly align the Cygnus cargo spacecraft flush with the International Space Station at the installation port. And you can see some motion on your screen now as the Cygnus is brought into place. Cygnus is being installed into the Earth-facing port on the station's Unity module, where it will stay for the next 6 months. The Cygnus cargo spacecraft is now about within 2 meters of the International Space Station. You can see some alignment work going on your screen. You sometimes see some movement. That white that you see over your screen is the interface. The International Space Station and the Cygnus cargo spacecraft is what we're working to get flush right now. We just got word that the thrusters can be inhibited on the International Space Station. This is one of our steps in our procedures today. Once again, when the Cygnus spacecraft moves into its installation port, they don't want the space station's gyroscopes kind of thrown off whack, so they want to inhibit those just for the duration of the installation procedure.
Station Munich on SpaceX 2 with a heads up to our crew members. The MediaSat event with live audio and video from Columbus will start in about 5 minutes, and ALPA, please meet us on SpaceX 4.
One of the things that robotics officers are going to be looking for is a green light on the ready-to-latch sensors. There are 4 sensors on the 2 of them are on the Cygnus side and 2 on the International Space Station side of the common berthing mechanism. And they want to make sure that if they turn green, that means the Cygnus cargo spacecraft is in proper alignment. And the space station's attitude control thrusters are inhibited. Once again, this means that when the Cygnus cargo spacecraft is pressed into the International Space Station's port, that its inhibitors keeping it in the right orientation will not mistakenly think that the space station is moving out of the wrong orientation. Getting the Cygnus cargo spacecraft perfectly flush with the International Space Station is a meticulous process and is underway now.
Sensation on Space Ground 2 for earplugs.
With you on 2.
Could you please remind me where to find the earplugs?
Checking.
On your screen, you're getting a live view of that alignment process. This is the same view that robotics officers here in Mission Control are looking at, too, to perfectly get the spacecraft flush with the International Space Station.
Station Houston on 2, back with you, Jaws, for a location on the hearing protection.
With you on 2.
All right, it's in a half CTB in Lab 1, Overhead 5, Gulf 2. The CTB is number 1327, labeled hearing protection, and it's your preference what you pick from there.
Copy, thanks. Sensation on Space to Ground 2 for leak check prep, looking for 1.1 that embedded RFID reader radios are off.
JAWS 1.1 is complete. You have a go in 1.2.
Copy, thank you.
So what you're looking at is a view from the centerline camera system on the space station's Unity module, looking directly at the berthing mechanism on Cygnus. This is what our OSO, or Operations Support Officer, uses as a visual guide to make sure that the two berthing mechanisms are perfectly aligned before pushing in. Our robotics officer confirmed that they have 4 green RTLs. These are the ready-to-latch sensors. There's 2 on the Cygnus side and 2 on the International Space Station side. This means that his alignment is spot on and is ready to press in.
With you on 2.
Okay, in step 1.4, the scope meter pressure probe barcode is 000009, M as in Mike.
That's a good number.
If you're just joining us this Thursday morning, here on your screen, we're looking at the Cygnus cargo spacecraft. Earlier today, it made its arrival to the International Space Station, being robotically captured at 3:59 a.m. Central Time, or 4:59 a.m. Eastern. NASA astronaut Laurel O'Hara was at the control of the robotic arm from the space station's cupola. She grabbed onto the cargo spacecraft. The spacecraft is carrying 8,200 pounds of cargo, so no people are on board, but it contains scientific experiments, food for the astronauts, spacewalk equipment, and a ton more. Laurel O'Hara has handed over her controls of the robotic arm to robotics officers here in Mission Control. This is a completely ground-based operation as we work the installation of the Cygnus cargo spacecraft to the space station's Unity module. The view you're seeing doesn't look like much right now, but it's actually a view from the space station looking at the berthing mechanism on the Cygnus cargo spacecraft. It's what our robotics officers are using to perfectly align the spacecraft in order for it to press in and become installed to the space station. And first stage capture is complete. The alignment of the Cygnus cargo spacecraft is spot on and exactly where it needs to be for installation, and they're ready to move on to the next step in the process.
Station on Spacer on 2 for Node 1 camera view.
With you on 2.
Just curious, right now, can you see the Node 1 camera?
Stand by, we're routing.
And our robotics officer has indicated that he is ready for second stage capture to begin.
Station Houston on 2. Jaws, we're with you in Node 1. We have a good view.
Okay, so that's what I was curious about. You can see the view even though I haven't executed the next procedure yet to put the Node 1 camera back to the nominal config.
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure what she's asking. And Jaws, we do have a view. We can see you actually in the view, and curious what your, can you rephrase your question? And we also have a good CBCS view, if that's what you're asking, separate from the Node 1 camera.
Yeah, I guess what I'm asking is...
At second stage capture, the robotics flight controller asks the capture latches to pull Cygnus into the fully captured position, so it's pulling it tight against that installation port. And this is in progress now.
Return to nominal config, but I haven't done that yet, so I was assuming you couldn't see the Node 1 camera yet, but maybe you can.
Okay, Jaws.
Okay, I think we see. I think it's for a backup camera. It's not the normal XF camcorder. It's a different floater camera that one connects.
Yep, you discovered it. We have two different camera ports.
Okay, copy. Thank you. I was just curious.
And with that complete, the Cygnus cargo spacecraft is working on having its 16 bolts driven. That is in progress. All 16 are turning at the same time. The driving of the bolts is the final step in our installation coverage today. All 16 bolts are still driving, and it is in progress. Those 16 bolts are still driving. They're about halfway through the process of installing the Cygnus cargo spacecraft. We should expect just a couple of more minutes until that is complete. The bolt driving is complete. All 16 bolts are driven into place and successfully installing the Cygnus cargo spacecraft to the International Space Station. And with that, we have a successful installation of the Cygnus cargo spacecraft, and it's officially on board. We started today's operation with Laurel O'Hara capturing the spacecraft, and moving on to our installation coverage. This was all the work of robotics officers here in Mission Control Houston. First, they worked very meticulously to align the spacecraft flush with the International Space Station, making sure that those sensors telling us that everything was flush came online. Then the command was sent for the capture latches to make contact with the Cygnus side of the common berthing mechanism. It went on to be pulled. These latches pulled the Cygnus cargo spacecraft flush to the International Space Station, and at last, 16 bolts were driven, and they have successfully stopped moving, marking a complete installation of the Cygnus cargo spacecraft. Installation was complete at 6:14 a.m. Central Time, 7:14 a.m. Eastern, as the space station was flying off the coast of New Zealand. Today we are talking about a Cygnus cargo spacecraft named the SS Patty Robertson, which arrived at the space station today. It moved through a series of steps for a rendezvous and capture at 3:59 a.m. Central, 4:59 a.m. Eastern. Like we talked about earlier, NASA astronaut Laurel O'Hara successfully captured the spacecraft with the space station's robotic arm and turned it over to flight controllers here in Mission Control Houston. They just completed successfully installing the spacecraft to the space station at 6:14 a.m. Central Time, and it's expected to stay attached to the space station at the Earth-facing port of the station's Unity module for 6 months. This spacecraft is full of 8,200 pounds of cargo, and later today, the station crew will open up the hatch and unpack its contents. Cygnus contains fresh food, so they'll be very excited to receive that, as well as a number of scientific experiments that they can begin working on as the weeks go on. This Cygnus is supporting Northrop Grumman's 20th commercial resupply services mission, and we welcome the spacecraft to the station. That concludes our coverage today. This is Mission Control Houston.